Hi everyone, this is a brief history of Seoul's subway system taken from Kojects' presentation that was done in 2016 at the Royal Asiatic Society. Now before the subway came along, the only form of public transport in Seoul was the bus. And with the rise of the private motor vehicle, passenger numbers had been dropping. Travelling around Seoul had actually become very difficult for commuters now that the tram system had been abandoned back in 1968. There were plans to build 4 subway lines in Seoul, which had been considered even prior to the trams being removed. But the government did not show much interest and it was inevitably delayed. Now, in the period from 1960 to 1970, census results show that Seoul's population exploded from approximately 2.4 million to more than double that at 5.52 million. And that really boosted the need for a key transport solution even further. Progress had been notably slow until Mayor Yang Taek-sik became the 15th mayor of Seoul in 1970. Now, he was previously the head of the National Korean Railroad, and since he knew the importance of building a metro system, he got started on building it right away. Construction on Seoul's first underground subway took place between 1971 and 1974, and this was between Seoul Station and Cheongnyangni. It was completed in August 1974, and here is an image of the opening ceremony. Now, there had actually been plans for big celebrations with the opening of the subway, but on the same day it was scheduled to open, which was the Liberation Day of Korea, August 15, the First Lady was assassinated. And this meant that all big celebrations, all events planned were called off except this simple opening here. Now the short line was only 7.8 kilometers long, but it connected up to the existing railway, extending up north to Songbuk Station, which is known as Kwangwon University Station now, and also through to Incheon in the west and down south to Suwon. The underground section used and still uses a different electricity system to the rest of Line 1, and that's why if you've ever been on it, the lights will turn off for a second and then switch back on because it's changing the system. And within the first month of opening, there were 497 delays, so there were a lot of issues. Nevertheless, people were very happy with it. Now, rough plans for other subway lines to follow Line 1 had been drawn up, but they had changed a lot of times over the years. And when Mayor Yang stood down, the same month after the opening of Line 1, new Mayor Koo Ja-chun took the lead to the next project, which was Line 2, which is kind of the subway line which represents Seoul today. It's the busiest subway line. Plans had already been through multiple revisions for this line, including changing it into a loop. Now, when Mayor Gu came along and saw the plans, what he basically did is he drew the route himself in about 20 minutes with a coloured pencil on a map. And somewhat amazingly, the line was built from these rough plans. And that became what we know as Line 2 today, with very few changes. Now, although Line 2 was planned as a loop, it was built in stages and opened gradually over 4 years from 1980 to 1984. So the first section was from Seongsu to Shinseol-dong, which operates today as a secondary service off the main line. Construction began from Shinseol-dong not only because it was a transfer point, but also because rolling stock could be brought directly through from Line 1. Another section from Seongsu to Sports Complex was also built at the same time, and both sections opened on October 31, 1980. So looking on this map here, it started here up at Shinseol-dong. That was one section down to here, and then the other section down here originally to Jonghap Undongjang, and then the next section following that was down to the University of Education, or Kojects in Korean. So this map is from 1983, and following this, remaining sections were completed, including the final part, which was a 19.8 kilometer section, which completed the loop. And that was opened on May 22, 1984. Now, for 28 years, Line 2 was the world's longest metro loop at 60 kilometers until it was surpassed by Beijing in 2012. So there's Line 2, how it looks today, with 2 branches off it. And as mentioned before, it's the most used subway line in the country, and it transports over 2 million people a day. And so that makes up over 30% of all subway use in Seoul. Now, Seoul Metro was established in August 1981 as a public corporation, and it became responsible for operating lines 1 and 2, as well as picking up construction and future operations for the remaining 2 lines, lines 3 and 4. And so they were built, and they were actually opened on the same date in October 1985. So within a relatively short time, Seoul managed to create 4 new subway lines, and in 1990 the map looked like this, which is a big difference from 10 years prior at the beginning of 1980 when there was only line 1. Following this were plans to build the next round of subway lines, which were lines 5 to 8, and they were taken on by Seoul Metro Rapid Transit in 1994. The first construction began on line 5 in 1990, and by August 2000, all 4 lines had been opened. Seoul's metro system continued to grow over the next 2 decades with many new lines and extensions, providing a really efficient means to travel around the city. It's really become the lifeline of Seoul, and commuters use it more than any other transport mode. It's the 6th longest network in the world, and it's so efficient that even if there's short delays, these usually make news headlines as well. Seoul's metro system isn't just subway or heavy rail, but is also made up of other light rail lines and even one maglev line. And that's a brief history of Seoul's subway and metro development. Thanks for listening.